Hi, everyone. I hope you guys had a great week. Today, we're going to look at lessons 65 through 68. So let's get started. This week, you're going to need the lessons manual, the student worksheets, the math card games manual with the game cards, the drawing board, which you also know as the whiteboard, the T-square, the 30-60 triangle, the geometry panels, a pair of scissors, centimeter cubes, and the 4-in-1 ruler. Before we get started this week, I came across a great article written by Rachel Fuhrman, and I wanted to bring up a couple points that she makes in her article. I'm going to include a link to that article at the bottom underneath this video for you to consider and as you're teaching your child. So I'm really big into having parents encourage their children as they learn. However, sometimes these encouraging words that we use can actually be taken as insults or put extra stress on the child. So I want to share those comments with you. The first phrase that Rachel Fuhrman says that we should avoid is the phrase, "This is so easy." And while the concept might be easy for us as teachers, if your child struggles with that material at all, it will make them have negative feelings about themselves and their ability to learn. We do want our kids, though, to realize it is okay to struggle while they're learning, and we want to provide opportunities for them to ask questions. If we tell our kids that something is easy, but they don't understand it, they're less likely to ask for help or ask questions at all because they think, oh, it's easy, I should already know it. But what we do want is to make our kids feel very comfortable enough to ask questions and enjoy the learning process. Everybody struggles with something along the way, don't they? The next phrase to avoid is "you're so smart." Now, I have used that one with my kids before, but for the struggling learner, if they hear somebody say that to another student, "you're so smart," while working on an activity that struggling learner is struggling on, they might think to themselves, that child's smart because they know how to do this, so I must not be smart because I don't know how to do this. In addition, this compliment is referring to intelligence and not behavior. We as parent teachers want to encourage positive learning behaviors. So instead of praising your child for their being so smart or having a high IQ, instead we should praise our kids for their hard work, for their determination, for their attention to detail, their communication, maybe their ability to work with each other, or maybe their courage for trying something new. The other phrase that Rachel Fuhrman mentions in her article that should be avoided is, "you should already know this." And I must confess, I have said that to my kids on occasion, especially when I've gotten frustrated. And boy, did I regret it as soon as it left my mouth. By saying, "you should already know this," we're confirming in our child's mind that they are not good at math and that they will never be good at math. It also places the blame on the student for something that might really not be their fault. Rachel Fuhrman ends her article with this statement. She says, "The way we speak to our students has an immense impact, and small changes to what we say can really make a positive impact." So I wanted to share those thoughts with you as you're teaching your kids this week. Maybe consider rewording some of the things that you're saying to encourage our kids so that they actually do feel like they're a good student. All right, well, let's get started with this week's material. This week, your child is going to continue working on geometry concepts as well as beginning work on fractions, official work anyway, on fractions. So let's go ahead and start by turning to lesson 65. The first and last paragraphs in the warm-up section is reviewing terminology and shapes taught in lessons 60 through 64. Now, if you need to, you can go ahead and review those lessons or segments of those lessons, especially if it will help your child. The middle paragraph of that warm-up is reviewing the concepts of 1/2 and 1/4. If you need to, go ahead and draw shapes similar to what was on their worksheet in the previous week to help your child visualize the answers to these fraction questions. Look at the section called Reviewing Fractions. This is an introduction to fractions. The first two questions are asking about the halves and fourths. And what you might want to do is draw a shape with a line through it. So draw a circle or a triangle and draw a line through it showing halves. Then draw a second line through it to show the fourths. So you're splitting the halves into the fourths. And then for the third and fourth questions, you're going to do the same thing, but you're going to be working with thirds and sixes. So you can draw a shape, divide it into thirds, and then each of those thirds split in half to show the sixes. Triangles at the very bottom of that page is a great example for you to look at when splitting up your shape into thirds and sixths. Look at the section called Dividing Equilateral Triangles into Thirds. Here you're going to draw 2 equilateral triangles on the whiteboard, and then you're going to have your child divide those triangles into halves 3 different directions, all in the same triangles. So the final product will look at like the triangle at the bottom of the first page of the lesson. Let me show you what I mean. So here we have the equilateral triangle, and your child is going to divide that triangle in one direction in half. Then they're going to divide that triangle in half another direction, and then again in another direction. You're going to do that for both the triangles that you draw on the whiteboard. Once your child has divided that triangle into 6, then you're going to ask your child how many pieces the triangle is split into. And they're going to see that there are 6 pieces, or sixths. Then you're going to ask your child to partly erase those half lines that split up, so that they're now split up into thirds. Now, this might be a little difficult for your child to see, so give your child some time to think about it. If you need to, give them some hints along the way. Let me show you what I mean. So here we have the triangle after it's been split up into 6. Now you can guide your child to say, hey, we have 6s here. We need to get down to 3. Well, since 3 is half of 6, that means we need to get rid of half of these portions of these lines. How can we do that? And you might even want to guide them to a specific portion of the line and see if they can figure it out from there. So here we have 6 pieces, and we have these 2 that we can, if we erase this little line, we are now left with 1. Now, where else can we erase something so that we are left with 3 pieces? And then let your child guide you to this segment or this segment. Now you have 2 equilateral triangles, which means the one triangle, you're going to erase these short lines, and then the other triangle, you're going to erase the longer lines. Now take a look at the top of the second page of the lesson. It's called Worksheet 34. Here you're going to give your child the worksheet on the drawing board, or give them both pieces and let them tape the worksheet on the drawing board. Then you're going to have your child draw an equilateral triangle and divide that equilateral triangle into thirds or 3 pieces using the drawing tools. Let me show you what that looks like. So worksheet 34 is going to, the first part of the worksheet 34 is actually going to have your child draw 3 equilateral triangles and then also split those triangles into thirds. Now your child has already learned how to do the 36, or how to draw equilateral triangles, but let's just, for review, let's go over that. Okay, once your child's finished drawing the first 30-60 triangle, they're going to split it up into thirds similar to this. Now, there's a couple ways you can do this, but one of the ways that I've done this with my child is go ahead and start turning your 30-60 triangle so it's fitting with the 30-degree angle on the T-square. And then we're going to draw a portion of this half line. Then we're going to flip this T-square over and come from this other corner. And here, where these 2 lines intersect, is your center point of the triangle. So now we have that center point, and we're able to draw this line as well. And then you can just erase these extra little markings. Now for this one, you can address this one just a little bit different. We can start by drawing our vertical half line first. And this is going to line up with the very top portion of the vertex of this triangle. So I'm going to draw this line part of the way up. Then
I'm going to turn my 30-60 triangle. So again, my 30-degree angle is on the T-square. And I'm going to line it up with this corner. But I'm going to start drawing my line at this center line. And then I'm going to flip the T-square or the 30-60 triangle over, start at that line, and go on up. And then I can erase this extra little line. Now for this triangle, it's actually easier to do if you actually flip your drawing board upside down. And then you can draw the equilateral triangle as you normally do. And then you would actually do this one the same way as you did your first one. So you're going to line up your 30-60. Flip it around. That's our center point. So now we're going to use our 90-degree angle on our T-square. Line that up. And then we can erase our extra markings. So now that we flip this drawing board around again, there you go.
Once your child has divided that triangle into thirds, they're ready to finish up the worksheet. In fact, on the bottom of the lesson manual, see that the circle and the star are going to be done just like they did on the triangle. It just looks a little different. Now, the pyramid at the bottom of that worksheet might be a little more difficult for your child to think through. If your child does not see how to find 1/3 of those 9 squares, help them discover how many little triangles is in the 1/3. Remind them that you need 1 of 3, right? 1/3, 1 of 3. So for every 3 triangles, you need to circle 1 triangle. Another way to do that is to have your child count how many total little triangles there are on the pyramid, which, by the way, there's 9. Then give your child like 9 cards or 9 objects, 9 Legos or something, and have them split those 9 cards or Legos into 3 different groups. At the end of that, they're going to see that each group has 3 triangles in them, and that's how many triangles your child needs to circle. Just a couple ways to maybe help your child think through how to figure out how many is 1/3 of 9. In the conclusion section, there's a more challenging question to have your child think a little bit more deeply about fractions and shapes. The question is, what is 1/3 of 6? Now, you can show your child the triangle at the bottom of the first page of the lesson where it's divided up in 6 to help your child visualize it. You may also want to go ahead and provide your child, like we did with the other one, 6 objects and have them split those 6 objects into 3 groups. And then you'll find out that there are 2 objects in each group. So the answer to that question is, what is 1/3 of 6 is 2. There is not a math card game listed for this lesson, so you're going to want to pick a game to help keep up your child's math facts. All right, well, let's go ahead and turn to lesson 66. The first paragraph in the warm-up is reviewing fractions. If you need to, you can draw shapes to help your child visualize the question and then visualize the answer. Now, the second paragraph in the review is reviewing terminology from lessons 60 to 64. Again, you can review those lessons as you need. Take a look at the section called Worksheet 35. Again, your child can tape the worksheet on the drawing board, or if you want to, you can do that, tape the worksheet on the drawing board in advance. For problem 1, your child is going to draw an equilateral triangle and then divide it into fourths. So in lesson 65, we divided the triangle into thirds. In this lesson, we're going to divide it into fourths. So let me show you what that will look like.
Now for worksheet 35, your child is going to draw a couple more equilateral triangles on the lines provided. But then they're going to split those equilateral triangles into fourths. So let me show you how to do that. The first step is you're going to want to make this little tick mark at the very bottom of this triangle. So what you're going to do is line it up as if you're going to draw a half line, but you're lining it up, but you're only going to draw the little tick at the very bottom. Now that is where you're going to work off of to build your first set of fourths. Go flip the 30-60 triangle around. Your 60-degree angle is resting on the T-square. And then you have those, and now all you need to do is slide up your T-square to line up these lines. And there you go.
After your child has completed that activity, you're going to ask your child a couple questions. One of those questions is, how can you draw eighths from the fourths that they've already divided up? So let your child think through this a little bit. You may even want to remind them what they've learned so far. In the past, they've learned that they've split a shape into half. What did they do to that to make it fourths? And maybe even draw the shape on the board. Let me show you what I mean. So here we have a shape that's split up into half. And the question is, how can I draw fourths on this circle? Let your child think through it. And if they add this extra line, the other half, they now have four pieces. Then ask your child what they need to do to the thirds to get to sixes. And if they need to, show another diagram. So here we have a triangle that's split up into thirds. Ask the question, how can I draw six on this triangle? And hopefully they've remembered from the previous lesson that they needed to draw that extra line. So they're going to draw those extra little lines to make sixes out of the thirds. So they split up the thirds in half. So ask at the very end what they did to each piece of the shape. Well, they split each piece in half. So then how can we answer this question? What can you do to the fourths to draw eighths? Well, they split each piece in half. Then have your child complete the triangles on the worksheet 2 and 3. Sample solutions are shown in the lesson manual. There are more solutions for triangle 3, so your child might be a little bit more creative, and that's great, just as long as they're following the directions. Now, the last problem on the worksheet is completing the fraction chart, and that looks like this portion of it. So if your child does not understand how this chart works, kind of ask some questions to guide them along. So for example, here we see this piece is 1/2, right? 1/2. So what would this section be? So kind of ask questions to guide them how to solve this worksheet and how to fill it in. Look down at the section called Comparing Fractions. You will start this section by saying another name for fourth is quarter. And then you're going to ask several questions about fractions using quarter and fourths interchangeably. So make sure you have your child use that fraction chart on the worksheet to answer these questions as needed. Again, you're going to ask these questions and interchange the term quarter and fourth frequently. For example, if you look at the question 2, it says, how many quarters do you need to make a whole? If your child is struggling with learning or understanding that quarters and fourths are the same, then you might want to start off by saying, how many quarters or fourths do you need to make a whole? That way you're saying the same term both times and helping your child see that it means the same thing. Now, the conclusion will confirm whether your child fully understands the term quarter. So if they don't, then might want to review that segment just a little bit. There is no math card game for this lesson, so you're going to want to pick a game to keep up your child's math facts. Let's go ahead and turn to lesson 67. Now, this lesson is going to use the geometry panels. Now, because this is your first time using the geometry panels, this is basically what you're going to be using. This is the square, and you're going to need to have 7 squares. And here is the equilateral triangle, and you're going to need to have 8 of these. Now, if you have never used the panels before, the geometry panels before you get started, before class that day, you're going to want to take these and bend these edges forward towards the color section so they're ready to go. Just like that. And do that for all of the pieces that you're going to use. You will also need for this lesson the baggie of rubber bands. Also, you're going to need for this lesson some scissors, which are not included in the Right Start Math kit. Now, the warm-up section is going to be asking questions about fractions. Feel free to let your child use the fraction chart from worksheet 34 or 35 if they need to. Under the section called preparation, you are going to have your child build a tetrahedron, the square pyramid, and the cube. Now, I know it is very tempting to do this in advance by yourself. However, if you have a child that likes to build and work with their hands, don't take away the opportunity for them to build these shapes on their own. Now, if you want to be involved, or if your child struggles with figuring things out, then you might want to build your own shapes while they build theirs, so they can see what you're doing, so that they can watch and learn while they're doing. But for some, building these shapes is confusing. So let me walk you through how to build these different shapes.
I'm going to show you how to build a tetrahedron using the geometry panels. The first step you're going to want to do is make sure, of course, that they're folded in. Those edges are folded in. You're going to connect two of them so that you have your edges next to each other here like this, and you're going to slide your rubber band here along this edge. If you can see, it has a little bevel here. So whoops, there it is. So you can see that little edge. You're just going to tuck that rubber band in there, stretch it across, and you have your two put together. Now you're going to have a third one here. Do the same thing. Once you get these first three, then you can connect these two over on this side. Now the only thing is we have that empty bottom, and that's where we're going to put our fourth triangle. And you're going to then connect these the same way you did your other ones. And there you go, your tetrahedron. Now when you build your square pyramid, you're going to start the same, except for you're going to add a fourth triangle panel. Once you get those four triangle panels, then you're going to connect those. And then we have the bottom that we need to put on, and that would be where you would put our square. And there we have our square pyramid. Now when you build your cube, you're going to start with 4 squares rubber banded together. And you're going to take the 2 edge pieces and connect those. Then you're left with this kind of a shell, and we're going to top it off. Both the top and the bottom, we're going to put another square for each one. I'm just going to connect the one here, because I think you'll understand what I mean. And once you do that, you'll have your square cube.
Look at the section called Reviewing Faces and Edges. The lesson says the math word for surfaces of a 3-dimensional shape is face. So on a 3-dimensional shape, this is the tetrahedron, this would be considered a face. This would be considered an edge, and this would be considered the vertex. Now, if you'll take a look at the section underneath or right next to that, under the explanation section, it says, while we might refer to a surface of a cube as a side, the mathematical term is actually face, with the word side reserved for lines in a polygon or a 2-dimensional shape. Look at the top of the second page of the lesson called Reviewing Pyramids. You're going to show your child both pyramids that they've built. Then show them that these are pyramids because each one has a polygon on the bottom and a vertex on top. So this one has a triangle on the bottom and the vertex on top. And this one has the cube or the square on the bottom and the vertex on top. This one is called the square pyramid, and this one is called the tetrahedron. Make sure you have your child repeat the name of each shape to help your child learn the difference between the two. Now, this lesson will have you ask how many faces and edges each of the shapes have. When you're asking questions about these shapes, don't hand them the shape that you're asking for. In fact, you might want to just say, how many edges does the square pyramid have? And then just have them all sitting out there and see if your child knows which one is the square pyramid versus the tetrahedron. That way you can see if your child knows what the shape is. So you're going to give your child worksheet 36 on the drawing board, or you can have your child tape the worksheet on the drawing board themselves if they're comfortable doing that. Now your child is going to draw an equilateral triangle on the line that's provided. So here's the worksheet. They're going to draw an equilateral triangle on that line, and then they're going to divide that equilateral triangle into fourths, which is exactly what they did in the previous lesson. If you need to, with your child, go back and review that lesson. Then your child is going to draw off of this square an equilateral triangle on each side, just like that. So they're going to draw an equilateral triangle off that side, and so forth on each of those sides. Then you're going to have your child complete problem 5. Now, problem 5 is kind of out of order on the worksheet. It's up actually on the top left of your worksheet. And it's out of order on purpose because they're going to cut this one out. And it's going to ask your child how many faces, edges, and vertices are on each shape that you've built. Now, you're going to want to keep all of these shapes for lesson 68. The conclusion section on this lesson is going to ask questions about the shapes that your child has built in the lesson. Make sure they call the shape by their correct name: square pyramid, tetrahedron, or cube. Now, there is not a math card game listed for this lesson, so pick a game that will help your child retain their math facts. Make sure you're not skipping that math card game. Make sure you're putting one in. All right, well, let's go ahead and turn to lesson 68. The first paragraph in the warm-up section will have your child look at the shapes that they built in lesson 67 and answer some questions on those. The rest of the warm-up is asking questions about fractions. Go ahead and let your child use the fraction chart that they wrote up in worksheet 35 to answer those questions if needed. Then you're going to give your child worksheet 37 either already taped on the drawing board, or you can have your child tape the worksheet on the drawing board themselves. You're also going to give your child the T-square, the 30-60 triangle, the centimeter cubes, and since it's been a little while since we've used those, that's these little blue cubes, and the 4-in-1 ruler, which looks like this. Numbers on both sides. The next section is called Reviewing Centimeters, and that section is doing just that. It's reminding your child what a centimeter is. So you're going to hand your child a centimeter cube, and you're going to ask how long an edge is, one of these edges. And if they don't remember, if they don't know, you can either have them measure it using their 4-in-1 ruler, or you can say, well, it's called a centimeter cube. So what do you think the measurement might be? And so you're kind of letting them think about that just a little bit. Then you're going to have your child use those centimeter cubes to measure the lines at the top of worksheet 37. Let me show you an example of what this is going to look like.
So worksheet 37 is going to have you use centimeter cubes and line those centimeter cubes up on these little lines to see how long these lines are. So this line here is 1 centimeter long. This line here is 6 centimeters long because we are using 6 cubes. Now the next one's a little trickier because it actually goes over, or the cubes are longer than the line itself. So you can see here we got 3 full cubes and half of another cube.
Then you're going to have your child look at the 4-in-1 ruler. Now let me point out a few things to you as this is the first time you've used this ruler. So here's your inches side. This side, it looks just like all of the other rulers that you're probably used to. It's divided into 16ths. But if you flip the ruler around, this side The inches are divided into tenths. So there's 10 segments in between inches. Now on the opposite side, you're going to see this, they're in centimeters. So both of these sides are centimeters. Now this side up here, each centimeter is split up into halves. But this side, oops, there it is. This side, each centimeter is broken down into tenths or millimeters. Then you're going to take the 6 centimeter cubes and have your child line those 6 centimeters cubes and measure those 6 centimeter cubes. And they're going to find out that 6 cubes is also equal to 6 centimeters. Then you're going to have your child measure each line at the top of worksheet 37 and make sure that they got the same answer on the ruler as what they got when they were measuring with the cubes. The middle of the second page of the lesson will ask your child to measure different, or to add up different measurements. It'll be 3 centimeters plus 2 centimeters, 3 centimeters plus 2.5 centimeters, and so forth. If your child needs to, they can use the ruler for some help. So for example, if we're doing 3.5 centimeters plus 2.5 centimeters, we can go to 3.5 centimeters. That will take us to right there. And if I'm adding 2.5 more centimeters, I'm going to add 1, 2, and then another half, and that takes us to 6 centimeters. So helping your child learn to use the ruler, this is a great opportunity. These are great questions to help them learn how to do that. Now look at the section called Dividing the Equilateral Triangle into Twelfths. Now your child is going to draw the equilateral triangle on their worksheet, divide it into fourths, which they have done actually for lessons 66 and 67. Then your child is going to split up each of those fourths into thirds. And the result is shown in the middle of the second page of the lesson. Now the last sentence in that section says, tell your child that she is going to see a surprise when she is finished, which is that she's going to find a cube or a 3D drawing of the cube in the middle. That was something that I struggle with. I have a hard time seeing shapes. So I'm going to show you, in case you're like me, show you a picture of the cube so you know what it looks like. So here is that triangle that's broken up into 12ths, but here in the middle, you can see that 3D cube. Now take a look at the section called perimeter. Ask your child if they remember what the term perimeter means first, before you even start anything. If they do not know, have them look it up in the math dictionary. Now, for your help, remember a perimeter is the measurement around an object. Remember, peri means around and meter means measurement. So perimeter means measure around. Then your child is going to complete the worksheet by calculating the perimeter of the different shapes found inside the shape that they just drew. And in case you're like me and you struggle in finding those different shapes, here are the pictures of the shapes to help your child find them. So here we have the large equilateral triangle. This is the small equilateral triangle inside the large equilateral triangle. Here we have the small rhombus. And here we have the hexagon. Once your child has finished calculating the perimeter for each shape, ask them how they got their answer. Now your child may have added all of the sides together, or they may have multiplied. So for example, for the small equilateral triangle, your child might have done 8 times 3. Each side measured 8 centimeters, and there were 3 sides. So 8 times 3. That way you're able to understand how, or learn how your child is understanding the process. Also, whichever method they did not use, share with them that alternate method to make sure that they have a well-rounded understanding of how to calculate perimeter. There is not a math card game listed for this lesson, so you definitely want to play a math card game to keep up those math facts. Well, that's it for the week. If you have any questions or concerns about a lesson, or if your child is struggling with something, give us a call or email us. We're here to help. I look forward to seeing you next week as we cover lessons 69 to 72. Have a great week, everybody.